Hi, everybody. My name's Tim Sismy. I am a process and productivity consultant. I've a little company called Make Work Work Better. And my interest is in helping organizations to improve their internal processes and be more productive, whilst also thinking about the effect that the way that we work has on our mental health. So how does the amount of work we have and the way that we do our work impact the way that we feel about our work? Um, and today we're going to talk about problem solving. And I'm a big believer that we are, as human beings, rubbish at problem solving. And there are reasons for that, I think. And weirdly, the first reason that we're bad at solving problems is because we're really, really good at coming up with solutions. As a person, if you are confronted with a problem, most of the time you will almost immediately come up with a solution. And I think this is an evolutionary thing in that once upon a time, the problem that we were confronted with, if we didn't solve it immediately, might eat us. And therefore, we would need to come up with a solution very quickly. But we're not really in that situation most of the time anymore. So we are great at coming up with solutions. But as we'll talk about in a little while, that doesn't always help us really solve the problems because we don't really think about whether the solution we've come up with is right for the problem that we're presented with. The second reason that we aren't great at solving problems, we tend to think too big. We tend to overestimate the scale of what we need to do in order to solve a problem. And we also tend to not be satisfied unless the solution we come up with fixes everything. So because we don't spend time understanding what the problem really is, we don't think maybe it's more than one problem, or we don't think that maybe there are several different solutions for the way that we're approaching it. We have this deep need to come up with the solution that will fix everything, or just not bother. So we tend to jump straight to solutions. We tend to think too big. And often, most of the time, we don't know how to tell if it's worked or not. So we will solve a problem and move on, and we won't know whether it's worked. We won't really know what it would look like if it's worked. And if we do find out it's worked, because of this thing I mentioned earlier about like us feeling like we need to fix it all at once, we often tend to cherry pick the outcomes that we need in order to be able to say, yes, that's all fine now, we've ticked it off. So again, we have this discomfort with things not being right, the need to have a solution. And if the solution hasn't exactly solved everything, there are probably lots of reasons that we can come up with as to why that's not a problem. So there are these three sort of built-in behaviors that we have that really get in our way of successfully solving problems. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is a simple, well-known problem-solving framework. If you've ever been involved in any kind of process improvement, especially kind of lean process improvements, you may have come across a version of this framework. So I'm not claiming that it's mine, but it is one that I find it works very, very well. And we're going to talk you through that. And if you want to play along at home, so if you've got a problem that you're currently grappling with and you want to try applying this, then as Lauren said, there is a template in resources, which should be at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, then you'll get a little window pop up, and on the files part of that resources, there's a PDF that you can download. That'll help you follow the process through, the framework through, either now if you want to do it, play along, or if you want to do it later on. There are a few little prompt questions in there as well, so you can kind of self-coach through it. So even if you don't want to do that now, maybe download it because it might be helpful to use as a refresher on what we're going to talk about today. So the framework that we're going to talk about is called C5. That is a There are various different versions of this. There is a very simple version of it, which is C3. There's a middle version of C4. I'm going with C5, and it's called C5 because it is made up of 5 words that all begin with C. It's not any more complicated than that, really. And each one of these words, phases in the problem-solving framework, maps onto an important thing that we need to do in order to solve the problem. Now, this is the disclaimer. Following this, I won't guarantee that it's definitely going to solve your problem, but it will help you understand. It'll definitely help you understand the problem. And if you get to the end and it's not solved it, you've got more information than you had when you started, and you can go through again. So it's designed to be a loop. It's designed to be a process through which you go to understand more about the problem and try things. You've probably, as risk management professionals, come across the plan, do, check, act cycle, and this fits very nicely into that kind of approach. So, concern. So when we say concern, it's what's the problem? How do we demonstrate how do we describe the concern? How do we describe the thing that we want to be different? We use concern here a couple of reasons. One, it starts with C, and as you remember, this is the 5C framework, so it's very important that it starts with a C. But also, you know, maybe the thing's not a problem yet. You know, maybe this thing that we are talking about hasn't happened yet, but it is something that might happen, and we are concerned about it. So having this as using this language it allows us to be more proactive than a problem, which suggests that something is already in the way. Now, when we're talking about a problem, quite often that's someone say, "What's the concern? What's the problem?" And you'll get something like this: "We need more people. We need more people," or "The data is always wrong." And these might be statements of where somebody is at this point, but they aren't helpful for us in understanding the concern. So to enable us to really properly understand the problem or concern, we need to think a little bit more about how we're describing the problem. Now, a good way of describing a problem, so a good problem statement, should be factual, and it should be neutral. Okay, so if you've ever talked to anybody about had any sort of training about how to give feedback, you should be talking about something that is undisputable and factual and has no sort of emotion or value judgment attached to it. You're describing something that is, you know, this happened. The problem statement should be the same thing. Quite a lot of the time, problems don't get resolved because there isn't an agreement between the various different parties of what the problem is, because people are starting from a point of view of blame, almost. So it should be factual. You should be able to take this statement and present it to anybody who's got any involvement with the problem, and they should go, "Yes, that is true." And as far as possible, you should be able to quantify it, and it should be as specific as possible. So it should be all of those things, and it should not make broad assumptions, make any assumptions. It should be able to back up every statement it makes. It definitely shouldn't assign blame, and it should not suggest solutions. So if you're making assumptions, you're immediately glossing over any opportunity to get more information. Because if you've got an assumption, then that will remove the likelihood that you're going to go and get more information. Assigning blame is a great way of getting absolutely no buy-in from the people who you need to help you solve the solution, solve the problem, to solve the problem. And suggesting solutions is a big pitfall. And let's sort of think about that now. So going back to our examples. Sorry, I need to go backwards the wrong way. So think about our examples. We need more people. The problem with that as a statement is that's what we think the solution is. And the only way to fix that is to get more people. If you believe that's your problem, the only way to fix that is to have more people. And oftentimes in business, there aren't going to be more people. And so as a team, you're immediately, well, that's never going to happen. You feel demoralized, and you as a leader aren't able to support the people, because the only solution to we need more people is more people. Similarly, the data is always wrong, is a bit blamey, because somebody's clearly getting it wrong, and it's not specific enough. It's got there's a sense in there of well, define data, and define always, and define wrong. Which data, and is it always wrong, and how is it wrong, and how wrong is it? So we need to be more specific, and we need to avoid suggesting a solution, because if we suggest a solution, we're going to lock down our thinking to just needing more people. So I've now got to go back through this bit. There we go. So at this point, you need to ask yourself 4 questions. And the first question is, what do we know? What do we actually know? Not what do we think we know, but what do we actually know? And for every one of those things that you know, you need to then ask yourself the question, how do we know it? How do we know that? I drive people absolutely up the wall with this one, because it's part of my job to work with subject matter experts who know loads about the thing that they're talking about. And because they know loads about the thing that they're talking about, they speak very much in certainties, because they know this thing, and they live with it every day. I don't, and so quite often then when they assert that 45% of our output is delivered to a particular area, they go, okay, how do we know that? How do we know that? Can you point me to where we go to know that? And usually they can, and that's great, because then that's where I can start to get more information. But sometimes they can't, because sometimes the things that we know, we don't really know. We've maybe heard them, or we've maybe they were true once, and we haven't checked recently to see if they're still true. So always just checking, what do we know and how do we know it? I'll give you a very silly little example. I worked for an organization a little while ago, and one of the things that we were looking at was their attrition rate of staff. And there was a point where they said that we know that people, we know we lose a lot of people after a year, because that's when their probation period finishes, and they don't have to pay us back for their training anymore. So we're training people and they leave after a year, and we know that that's the case. And I was like, okay, how do we know that? And so they showed me a chart that had a big spike in the people who left after a year. But the problem with that chart was that the graph across the x-axis, the scale on the x-axis, was monthly, and then after a year it went to yearly. So there was a big spike because the data points contained more people, but that graph had gone viral almost internally, and everybody just knew that there was a spike in leavers after a year, and no one had ever challenged it. Turned out to not be a thing. But the point is, how do we know what we know? And then once we look to that, what don't we know? What don't we know about the thing that we're talking about? So it might be actually that's one of the things we thought we know, we now no longer know. But also, what are the things we haven't thought about within this conversation? What are the things that we don't know about it that we might need to know a little bit more about? And just think about, how do we learn those things? So at this point, I appreciate we are now 15 minutes into a effective problem solving session, and we're still not solving problems. We're still talking about what is the problem. And this is how effective problem solving works, is that defining what that problem is and understanding the current state of the problem really, really thoroughly is the bulk of the work often. When you really, really understand a problem, the bit on the back end sometimes doesn't take quite as long as you think it's going to. This is the bit where we need to really understand the problem and get as much really trustworthy information as we can. So going back to this, we've gone through this process. What do we know? What don't we know? We need more people. That's not really helpful because that's telling us the solution. The data is always wrong. That's questionable and also unhelpful. So we need more people. A better version of the problem statement could be, over the last 8 months, the installation team have worked an average of 32% overtime in the first week of the month. That sounds like a lot. This is affecting the team's work-life balance and reducing their capacity to pick up new contracts. So there's a bit of impact in there. Putting impact around the problem is really important. What's the so what of this? Okay, because then you're going to think, because we're going to be thinking a little bit about how are we going to measure this? Okay, how are we going to know it's worked and why is it better? Why is it important we fix it? So we've now got a statement. We know how long it's been going on for. We know who it applies to. We know how much more of the thing is happening. We know when it's happening. And we know what the impact is. For the data is always wrong. Since August 2022, we've had an average of 18 payroll amendments per week. Okay, so is 18 a lot? Well, it's up 91% on the first year average. So on the first half of the year average. So clearly that's something's changed, it's increased. It's causing extra work for the payroll team and for us. And on 6 occasions has led to employees being incorrectly paid. We know when it started, we know how big it is, we know how big it is in comparison to what was going on previously. And we know what the impact is. And people being paid incorrectly is obviously a bad thing. Okay, so that's your first C. And we're now going to skip to the end and talk about the last bit, because this is the point where, when you're defining what your problem is, this is the stage that you can actually decide what your finish goal looks like. So thinking about those, thinking about, is it fixed? This will be closed when we have the same level of mistakes as we had previously, no mistakes at all. This will be fixed when we've got no overtime. This will be fixed when we've got this amount, less overtime. You know, what are we trying to achieve? And set something that feels achievable. And if you overshoot it, then great. You know, but set yourself a target. So in the case of our first one, that we need more people on the overtime one, let's just say, right, let's try and get our overtime levels back to what they were before this problem started. Let's not over engineer it into be something else. But take this, and if you've got the template, you've downloaded the template, you've got it, you can see that the closed when and the concern boxes are quite next door to each other, so that you can do that. Okay. And this is what they might look like. First week of the month, average overtime is less than 15% over a 3-month period. We will know when we hit that. And if we don't hit it, that's fine. Maybe we've not quite got the solution, but that's set a line in the sand. Okay? So set yourself a target condition. We don't know how we're going to get there yet. And that doesn't matter at the moment. We just need to know what it is we're trying to achieve. Quick word about containment. One of the challenges that I get a lot of the time is that, Tim, we do not have time to sit around pontificating about what the problem might be and what our target condition is, because we are paying people wrong. We are doing this thing and it is affecting people. And I don't have time to sit around talking about this when all these problems are going on, and we just need to go out and fix the damn thing. And I completely 100% accept that challenge. Containment is a word that begins with C, that means stopping the problem affecting our customer or the customer of the process. And in this case, what that might mean is putting in more checks, or what that might mean is paying somebody extra to come and join a team, or whatever it might happen to be. But containment always has some kind of cost. Containment that's not solving the root cause is always adding complexity to a process, and it's always masking a bigger problem. So call it what it is. Call it containment. Don't call it a solution. What it is, what we talk about here is it's a sticking plaster. Okay, and the sticking plaster will help us in the short term. But if you keep cutting yourself and keep needing plasters, then you need to think about why you're cutting yourself. So in our case, containment to our overtime problem might be we second an extra engineer to the installation team from maintenance during the first week of the month. If you remember, first week of the month is where we got that bottleneck. And That will have a knock-on impact to the maintenance team because they'll be losing someone. Okay, so we need to check overtime in maintenance, and we should, keep reviewing that. That would, it's not a fix because there is an impact. The payroll data one, well, if we're paying people wrong, the obvious thing to do is add a check, right? So let's add a check to the payroll data before processing. Job done. Except it's not done because you've still got something that is causing an issue. I've seen processes in the past that have had 6 different checks, where you've got people checking the checks and checking the checks to make sure of increasing seniority that are in place because the actual downstream problem hadn't been fixed. And the more checks you add to things, the more you dilute the accountability of people doing the work. If you've got 5 people who are checking something, whose job is it to make sure it's right? So from a check point of view, it's going to delay the payroll processing. It's going to dilute accountability for quality. It might not even help. And so we need to make sure that we're measuring the impact of this containment, recognizing that the containment will have an outcome and that it's not the solution. But it'll stop us paying people wrong in the short term. All right, now we get into cause. And at this point, we've done a lot of work understanding the problem. Yeah, we've drawn up all the various different, pulled out all the data. We've shown that we understand what's going on in the current state. So we're at a point now we can start to try and identify the root cause. I'm going to talk about 2 tools that you can use to help identify cause and effect and root cause. Some of them you may be familiar with because I know that these are used as part of incident investigations and other risk management processes, but it may help to have a bit of a refresher. So the first tool I want to talk about in relation to cause is the Ishikawa diagram, sometimes called the fishbone diagram. This is a tool for determining cause and effect. Okay, think of it as a structured brainstorm. So there is this version of it uses something called 6Ms, which basically creates 6 buckets, all of which in a certain version of it start with an M, but I've changed them because they don't always translate well outside of manufacturing particularly. So we're thinking about what this enables you to do is get people thinking about what might be causing the thing that we're talking about. You're giving them give them all the information, show them all the data that you've got, and then think, right, this outcome that we are seeing here from our problem statement, what might be the contributing factors to this? Now, what you'll notice that I keep talking about team and I keep talking about engaging the people. If you're trying to do this on your own, filling in this template won't help. You should be involving the people all the way through the process, the people who are affected by the problem and the people who do the work as much as possible, and ask them loads of questions because they're the ones ultimately, well, A, the ones who will give you the information that you need, and B, are possibly the ones whose behavior will need to change in order to fix the problem. So you should be involving them right the way through. If you've not already involved them at this point, this is a great time to do it because this is where you're asking where does this impact come from? What I like about this as a tool is that it gives you an opportunity to get people's immediate preconceptions and prejudices out of the way. So invariably, if I do one of these that's in any way to do with IT or in any way to do with an office-based, sort of knowledge work-based environment, everyone will have opinions about how good the laptops are, the responsiveness of the IT help desk and the Wi-Fi. And those aren't invalid, but we do need to get them out of the way in order to get to possibly the other things that may be going on. So what I would do is I would run this and then we got a whole bunch of stuff about equipment. There's, the machines that we get from IT to do this are all rubbish. You can get all that and you go, okay, right, I hear you, we understand that. What else? Is there anything else? And you run again, maybe focusing on other things. Sometimes you might have a bone on this that's really obviously empty. So everyone's put stuff on equipment and materials and environment and measurement of people. No one's put anything on method. Kind of, okay, right, let's go again. And let's just think about the process. Is there anything in the process that could be improved or that might be causing this? So what you're after is cause and effect. You're after trying to draw out the things that might be that might be leading to us having issues. And generally, I will just do this. You write the name, you write the problem in the head of the fish, and you get people just stick post-it notes on it. You can do it remotely, you can do it in person, and you can start to get a bit of a feel for where there might be things you can go at. Now, this isn't a root cause analysis tool. This is a cause and effect tool. What this will do is it'll enable you to spot some areas that you can then dig into a little bit more. The other tool is called 5 Whys. And what we have here is an example 5 Whys process. So, and this is a really, really well-known tool for digging down into questions. Fair disclosure, it's rarely as linear as this suggests it might be, and quite often you'll see people doing what they call why trees, where there might be more than one why for a particular answer, and they draw it out like a sort of family tree type thing. But this gives you a bit of an idea. This is a real example. So, as we know, the installation teams have higher than average overtime in the first week of the month. Why is that? Week 1's installations take longer than standard timings. You could see that through the data. This was interesting. Why do week 1 installations take longer than standard timings? Well, Tim, we have to join 3 pieces of ducting together instead of using a long piece. Now, that's the sort of information you can only get from the people who do the work. Yeah. And then, oh, why is that? Oh, it's like we've always run out of long ducting. And the supplier doesn't deliver the long ducting until the 6th of the month. Okay, so talk to me about that again. You always run out of the long ducting. Yeah, that's right. So we join 3 pieces together just until we get some more long stuff delivered. Okay, why'd you do that? Just always been like that. I had a client who said to me one time that she thought that many of the things that they did in their offices were like superstition. She wasn't sure why. No, people didn't really understand why they did them like that. It was just they were worried that something bad would happen if they didn't. It had just always been like that. People haven't challenged it. There's an awful lot of that goes on in all kinds of parts of businesses that were just standard business practices and never been challenged. So anyway, this feels like something that you can fix. And I'm not saying it's absolutely going to fix all of the overtime, but it feels like it's something we can go at. So the fishbone diagram, the 5 Whys, really good ways of getting you to find something actionable and areas that you can concentrate on within a broader piece of what could be causing it. But in order for them to be useful, you need to understand the current state. You need to go through that problem understanding piece from the top. And then we get to countermeasure. Countermeasure is a word that means solution that starts with a C. It's very important that it starts with a C. This is where we actually get to start thinking about solutions. I really like this ease impact matrix for solutionizing. It's, as you can see, very straightforward. Along the bottom, so the x-axis, that is how easy is the thing. If it's over on the left, then it is hard. If it's over on the right, then it is easy. The up and down y-axis is the impact. So if it's low down, then it is going to have a very small impact on the problem we're going to try and solve. And if it's at the top, then it will have a very big impact on the problem that we're trying to solve. I like this because it is it gives you a license within the team to come up with all the ideas. Without a framework like this, people will often censor themselves. I'm not going to suggest this solution because it feels like it might not be big enough. It allows you to get past that we think too big thing. I'm not going to suggest this solution because it would need budget, and I know we've not got any budget. So people self-censor themselves when we're trying to use a solution. Whereas with something like this, I generally don't like the whole there are no stupid ideas thing, because sometimes there are stupid ideas. But what this enables you to do is put all of the ideas into some kind of context. So you might have something that is going to be really, really impactful, that is going to completely remove the problem, like solve the cause completely, but it's going to cost some money. So that would go on the, far left in the top quadrant. That doesn't mean we should discount it. What it means is that actually maybe it's going to take a bit longer to get there. Maybe the problem is such that that level of investment is absolutely required, and we should do that as a business. But if there's something in the top right, then maybe we shouldn't do that first. So, as an example, implementing just-in-time delivery of long ducting. So we get the long ducting, the exact amount that we need for that job is delivered to the site where we're going to be doing that installation, and it's there in the morning when we arrive so that we can just crack on. That feels like that would be an awesome way of doing it, because think of all the savings you've got in having to store ducting and all of those things. That could be fantastic, but that's not going to be easy to implement. It doesn't mean that we should just completely discount it. Similarly, it's going to have less impact and it's going to be quite hard to do is hiring a new team member. There's no budget really for hiring people, and we only need this for 1 week of the month. That seems like the wrong. It's not going to have an impact, the kind of impact that we want, and it's going to be hard for us to do. So that's kind of goes in the not worth it section. But we could just have more deliveries of long ducting, or maybe we just order more long ducting. Both of those things feel like, we could probably do that. We need to get some more information to find out which one of those is going to be better for us. Actually, how much short ducting do we not need to order now that we're ordering more long ducting? Do those things balance out, so on and so forth? This just enables, or we could do a thing where we pre-join the short ducting together, so to make long ducting before we send it out. I'm saying ducting quite a lot, aren't I? Starting to not mean anything to me. Anyway, you can see what we're doing here is we're encouraging people to put out ideas, and then we are arranging them in a framework that enables us to not dismiss ideas, but assess them on their merits in this case. And then how did we do? You look at your closed when. Did we achieve the reduction in overtime that we wanted to get to? Did we achieve the reduction in rework in payrolling? If we did, then fantastic. If we didn't, then how close did we get? Did we get some of it? And if we did, then great. But then there's more still to go at. So then you start the process all over again. So there's your 5C framework. So concern. What's the problem? What's the concern? Be really, really specific about that. Ask lots of questions and find the proof. Find the information that will back up all the assumptions that people will make about this problem. And don't solutionize. Please don't solutionize. Containment. Put some sticking plasters in place, but recognize that they are sticking plasters. Look for the root cause, the thing that if we fix it, everything will go away. There may be more than one. You may have to go through this a number of times, but just focus on one cause and apply a countermeasure. Countermeasure is your solution. Go for ease and speed of implementing over budget and people costs. More often than not, you will get you will be able to find something that you can implement alongside maybe something more complicated. Don't focus entirely on, we need an entire new payroll system. And make sure that you're identifying what success looks like at the beginning, so you'll know how close you got to it when you are at the end. Makes it so much easier to explain to people how well they've done in solving the problem and report to anybody else who's interested on how the problem went. And in all of these cases, there will be a next action. As I said, this isn't something you work through on your own. And this isn't something that you're going to be able to sit down and do in half an hour at your desk. So when you sit down and try and work out the concern, you'll look at it and go, okay, so these are all the things I know. But what don't I, how do I know them? Well, actually, I don't know how I know them. So my next action is to go and dig up a load of data to find out how I know those things. Or the next action might be to get a group of people together to do a root cause analysis. Or your next action might be that you need to find out some budget your concerns about the various different countermeasures you've identified. Every single one of these stages will involve next actions, and the best way of moving these things along is to identify what's the next physical, visible thing that I can do in order to move the situation forward. And on the page 2 of that PDF template that I've given you there, you've literally just got a list of next actions on there. So somewhere that you can say, right, what is the next thing we need to do to understand the concern, or to find some containment, or to find the cause. So there's it's a process, and you can move it forward, but you can move it forward just by identifying what's the next thing that I need to do. Okay, we have about 15